Three, two, one. And we are back. We are back after some weeks apart. My compadre, Miamo. Miamo? How do you say it, buddy?
I think that's my friend. Yeah,
Okay.
Miamo es David. My friend is David. Right.
Sure. Okay. I apologize if I cough during the show, the recording. It is that time of year, but it's good to see you, David.
Good to see you, Mark.
So we are here to talk about what, David? January 2025?
Yeah, the roll continues. Yeah.
So let's dive in, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. So what's the headline for Jan?
Well, continue to see accelerated growth year over year. It's being driven by delivery and fueled by those deep discounts on memberships and subscriptions. So there's a lot to unpack there, but that's the headline.
And so let's unpack it. So, the remarkable gains in delivery continue, as you said, driven by membership programs. We've talked in the past about, grocers competing. Let's get into whether, service, quality, personalization, etc. What do they play? What role do they play in repeat intent for regional grocers?
Well, I think the short answer is they all play various factors or have various weights in the decision to reuse a service or not. Ultimately, at the end of the day, customers are judging that experience based on some fairly simple measures from their standpoint, which was, did I get everything I ordered, in the condition I ordered, in the form I ordered, as I ordered them. So whether we use the perfect order rate or substitutions is one metric that's going to be important. But another is, did I receive that order in a timely manner? And the reference or the way we frame that now is changing, which is important because historically that has benefited pickup, although delivery now is getting very close to some of the same perceptual comparisons based on tactics that we're seeing. So I think there's, again, a multitude of things that are going on that vary depending on what format or retailer we're talking about.
Yeah, that's an interesting question around confidence in delivery times. We know Walmart presumably has been really focusing in on that, and you've shared that with me in the past. Whereas some of the other 3PLs, visibility into delivery times from the time it leaves the store to the time it hits the customer's doorstep varies. Can you talk a little more about this increasing ability for the mass retailer to pinpoint delivery expectations?
Again, we have our 3 A's growth framework that looks at availability, attractiveness, and acceptability. And then when we really look at some of the behaviors in there that motivate change between methods, we have aspects of cost and control. Obviously, cost in that perspective is really defined as those explicit and avoidable costs. What are those? That's the gratuity, the service fee, whether it's delivery or pickup, and any other special service charges that may come in, right? Typically, that has benefited pickup because there generally, especially in mass, is no service fee or service charges, and there's no need to tip. In delivery, that is changing. We are now seeing essentially the waiving of those explicit fees because they're being covered by this membership that's paid up front. So we're no longer having to deal with the barrier or friction point of addressing explicit fees every transaction, although we still have gratuity. Not always, but sometimes. So the cost is now, the cost gap is closing. The convenience or control gap is defined by the perceived level of control a customer had when to receive that order. Pickup has historically benefited because those pickup windows generally were narrower compared to delivery. So most pickup windows are 1 hour. So I determine when I go. It could be before, during that window, or after, right? Whereas delivery, they say, okay, here's your window, your receiving window. They have typically been 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes as long as 4 hours. There are trade-offs for why that happens. But when you're given that long time window, you go back to the yesteryears when cable would say, we're going to have a technician out to your house between 1 and 5, and that technician shows up at 4:55, right? Ruins your day. You're upset. You're frustrated because you didn't know when they were coming. Well, that's changed now. We still have Walmart running 2-hour windows. So that in and of itself hasn't really improved its level of control. But what has is the continual drumbeat of updates. Your orders being selected, your orders being packaged for delivery. And each time they reset your expectation, because now in the case of Walmart, it's no longer your order will become between 2 and 4, but rather at 2 o'clock, you see a notice that says your order is being packaged up, ready for delivery, expected arrival time 2:30. So now instead of having a 2-hour window, I now know, I have 30 minutes, right? And those continual updates are resetting that expectation. Now, once you've reset that expectation, saying it's coming at 2:30 versus between 2 and 4, that's the expectation you have to work against. Now, Walmart is not perfect right now, and part of their hiccup is they're batching out multiple orders to their Spark drivers. So they're running into some issues that even I experienced the other week, where those ETAs really set a bad expectation because it ended up coming 20 minutes later. Now, it was still within the time frame, right? So I got it at, let's say, 2:45, but I was expecting it at 2:30. Originally, I thought it was coming between 2 and 4, but when they reset that expectation, it brought them much closer to pickup comparison, right? But you now have to deliver against that. But that right there, as they improve that, really now removes another barrier that was maybe slowing down the growth of the acceptability of delivery versus pickup. But you can imagine as they continue to work through this, they'll refine that approach to the point where now a person feels comfortable or at least aware that they'll get a tighter expectation right around the start of that window. So psychologically speaking, we now are getting a lot more control through that visibility, and that's helping delivery.
Was there a feedback mechanism? Do you know? Did they acknowledge it was late? Did you message them that it was late?
No, I mean, in this case, they sent the text saying that the driver was leaving the store and would be at my residence around 2:30. So I could see on the map in real-time tracking the car. So I knew it was one of their Spark drivers. But at 2:30, I kind of looked to see where they were because I didn't receive a notification. I could see that they were stopping somewhere else in my town. At that point, when I looked, I then also noticed the ETA had changed, although I didn't receive a notification of that change. So then I came back and looked again, and they missed that ETA window, and that was because they were making another stop in my town at another house. So I was seeing that I was at least the third stop on this multi-batch from the Spark driver. And I know that because I was at home when that driver arrived. In that case, it arrived, in essence, 20 minutes after the expected time of arrival based on that text message. So good and bad is they're improving the visibility into when those orders will arrive. The challenge they have in the near term is just addressing some of those issues, especially with the batched out orders, to ensure that the initial reset is realistic. Otherwise, you're just really setting up a bad experience.
You got to ask yourself, is it too much information a good thing or a bad thing? In this case, I got to think that someone at Walmart is also looking at these data so they can further fine-tune their models.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately for the customer to have increased visibility as to when their order is arriving is a good thing, so long as that estimate is realistic. Because once you provide that guidance, that's the guidance that they'll take. So in this case, yes, I was happy to see that was coming at 2:30. It prevented me from going on a walk with my dogs because that would take 15 minutes. Well, in hindsight, I probably could have done that because it was 20 minutes beyond the time that they initially said. So good and bad, they'll work through that. But I think regionals or other rivals need to be aware of that, because this is one of the tactics that they're employing that's helping drive demand for their delivery service. Again, there are many others this is one in particular that will improve the level of acceptability of the service, which in turn will improve the likelihood to repeat. And we have seen the positive trend there. So the strategy appears to be playing out as intended. We're seeing improved likelihood to repeat. And all the other metrics that we're looking at, either at the top line or specifically for Walmart relative monthly active users, order frequency, and average order value, which all are the drivers for the top line, are all trending in the direction you would expect based on these behaviors.
From the competition perspective, a regional who still is rolling out or modifying their pickup experience to provide greater sense of convenience and control to the customer. I think the January report said there's still some positive growth on the pickup side. Can you speak a little more about that?
Delivery grew well over 30%. Pickup was up just under 5%. Pickup is growing even in the absence of financial incentives or subsidies or whatever term you want to apply for all the deep or aggressive promotions that are really driving demand for delivery. Again, some of the reasons why pickup is growing, well, we are still seeing some retailers continue to finish backfilling their retail business, keeping in mind that most regionals started with delivery and then followed with pickup. That's the opposite for Walmart. Walmart reached full distribution with pickup 3 years ago, and they're effectively reaching full distribution just now with their first party delivery services. So Walmart's just getting started, and the regionals have to look at this and realize a couple things. One, yes, the business is growing, and if we take that adage, all boats with a rising tide, well, at least in this month, that's likely true for many of the retailers. Supermarkets have benefited. But here's the reality. The pool in which we are fishing for customers is decelerating, and it's decelerating at a point where the growth is coming from reactivating infrequent or lapsed customers, right? And let me put that in context. This year, the total pool of customers who've ever bought online is just approaching 80% of U.S. households. It's still under 80%. So since the beginning of tracking, 80% of U.S. households have at least once at some point in their life shopped online. Now, on a monthly basis, we're sitting at maybe around 57, 58% of all U.S. households placed an online order during January, whether that was for delivery, pickup, ship to home, one item or 50 items. And we are now seeing that the kind of the near-term trend, if we look at the 3-month moving average, the monthly active user base has inflated or expanded over the longer-term trend. And that's attributed, we believe, to all this aggressive promotion. We see that a lot of that reactivation or re-engagement is flowing into delivery, as we would expect, because those subscription and membership programs tend to have a very strong bias to delivery. So when you look at that, what regionals need to realize is, okay, the business is still growing. We're re-engaging lapsed and less frequent users. We really need to sharpen our pencils because it is only becoming more and more challenging to grow through acquisition of new customers, because Walmart and Mass growing their monthly active user base at an impressive rate, although in January it may have, kind of flattened, but that's again expected. Walmart was slightly up, and they may be cresting, but they still serve half of all monthly active users. And that's partially because they have a strong advantage over regionals in the form of their general merchandise, their non-grocery items.
Right.
And by general merchandise here, I'm not referring to household supplies or cleaning products. I'm talking about electronics and apparel and things of that sort that regionals or supermarkets just simply don't carry.
Is that deceleration attributable to some demographic structure? As I would presume younger demographics get older, who tend to be more digitally engaged, that will shift? What's your expectation?
we have a dynamic model that is reflecting changes in population at the age level on a monthly basis across the years. The oldest segment that we track, which is over 60, that's growing incredibly fast. Now, that is the most underpenetrated group because we know that technology and age tend to share an inverse relationship with each other. And you don't have to just look at online shopping to see that. With that being said, what we're just simply seeing is as the market continues to increase its penetration, like I said, the share of households in the US who have ever shopped online is still just under 80%. The ability to keep moving that up is increasingly getting more and more challenging. It's the law of diminishing returns. There are some people who simply will not shop online for one simple reason. They don't use the internet, right? And that's still a fairly sizable group in the US. It will change over the next 5 years. We project that change, but it's a very slow, gradual process. So we're dealing with that factor. On top of the fact, there are still very strong preferences for how we shop or buy groceries, right? I mean, that's why the majority of the sales remain in the store. There are certain departments that really are not as good a fit for many when shopping online because they prefer to use their senses to make those purchases.
Before we finish this episode, I'm curious, what do you see as coming next when it comes to future growth drivers beyond membership?
Yeah, well, that's good because, membership has its S curve and we're probably about at maybe halfway through that curve. So the next one is really around, basket building. Right? I mean, that has been around. So basket building is going to really lean heavily on personalization. And man, oh man, I would tell you, Walmart is out of the gate running fast on that one too.
Can you give me a few examples?
Yeah, I won't tell you the tradecraft by which we get to it, but if you're a member of, first of all, if you're not a member and you go to the website today, what you'll see is they're offering a free trial for their Walmart Plus. Now, that was the historical way they did it, but what's really driven their signups is when they drop that to a 50% discount on the annual. But once you're in, you'll see different offers. So for instance, I signed up for that Walmart Plus, and now instead of seeing that free trial offer in the same panel on the screen, I'm now being upsold to move into Express for $5 or $10 extra and get my orders even faster. Or I'm being, upsold into in-home delivery, which I think is another $6.99. Now, that last one is actually gaining a fair amount of traction. And a lot of older consumers.
I know when it first came out, people were very suspicious of letting strangers in your home. But you say Walmart's been able to change that perception.
Well, just keep in mind when delivery to the fridge first came out, it was Amazon through their acquisition of Ring. Walmart has approached it a little differently. It's fairly similar to the outside eye, but from what we can see and what we've heard, there is a strong interest in that amongst a subset of these shoppers. Some of those shoppers tend to be in that older group. They may be shut-ins. They don't have access to a car. They're not able to drive. They may not be able to leave the house. So whether they're electing to do that or they're being gifted it, which is also happening quite a bit by their relatives, think like their adult children, this is helping Walmart gain access, not just literally to new households, but figuratively to households that may not have shopped with them otherwise.
Fascinating. All right, David, appreciate your time today. I look forward to our next recording. I wish you a pleasant week, pleasant month, and we'll be at it next time.
Great, Mark. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.